From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. We are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. If you could, we would appreciate if you go check out yourunpodcast.com and go say hello to some of the new members that are on there, or look at some of our old episodes, or whatever you want to do. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, and his name is Sean, and he's been wrestling a microphone for about 8 minutes now. Sean, how are you today?
I was going to say, contrary to all the technical problems that I just had a second ago, I'm not a psycho. I'm just an asshole.
I mean, those two words can be the same thing at times.
You know, if it wasn't for bad luck.
Well, that's true. That's the motto for 2024 or 2025.
This is 2025, John. What are you talking about?
This is true. It's almost as if we're recording this at a different time.
I know. It's totally weird. It's weird that you mentioned that.
Now that we're in January 2025, Sean, what have you been watching in this January of 2025?
Well, I've turned over a new leaf. I decided that I would watch She's All That with Amanda Bynes.
Okay.
I watch it with my kids. So I thought that would be the only thing I'd have to talk about. But last night I was able to cram in 2 documentaries, and they're both very related to each other, but also big doozies. So the 2 documentaries.
Let's go back a second here. I want to hear more about She's All That.
My kids wanted to watch it, and I was like, I don't really want to watch this, but I ended up watching it with them. It was fine.
I don't even know what it's about. Is she in fact all that, or is she just that?
Oh no, it wasn't She's All That. It's called She's the Man. She's the Man with Amanda Bynes.
Thing,
People
right?
are listening and they're like, She's All That. That's not Amanda Bynes. She's the Man with Amanda Bynes. She plays.
She's the Man with Amanda Bynes. Sounds like its own title without.
She plays Viola, who is a girl who plays soccer, and her team's soccer team. Her school's soccer team is going to be cut the next year. So she decides, while her twin brother, is away with his band in England for the first 2 weeks of the school year, that she's going to impersonate a boy and play on the soccer team and beat her school's boys soccer team because it's the first match. So she impersonates her brother. So kind of
like, what was that? One of the guys?
Yeah, just one of the guys. Kind of like that. Yeah. I think that one's a little bit more with, I don't know.
Well, that's football, not soccer.
Right.
Football.
Football. Yeah, Vinnie Jones is in the movie. Who else is in it that you'd even recognize? Oh, Channing Tatum, who I kept saying was Tatum Channing.
It doesn't matter.
To my kids, and they're like, no, that's Channing Tatum. I'm like, oh, no, I think it's Tatum Channing. Who else is in it? Nobody else really that seems like all that important. But those are the 2 big headliners. It was fine. It's like an early 2000s kids movie, teens movie, which
I
I'm
can't say I'm
not below me.
That one, so
you should see it. No, it's fine. You don't have to see it. I just told you everything you need to know, and you're an expert.
I'll watch One of the Guys or whatever again. I prefer that one.
Yeah, that's not a bad one.
Anyway, documentaries.
Yeah. So, anyways, the documentaries I watched are 2, and they're really closely related. One's called Driver 23, and the other one is called Atlas Moth. Driver 23 is the first one. It's filmed like mid 90s, and it's a documentary about a band called Dark Horse. They're out of Minneapolis, and they're fronted by they're like a metal band, and they're fronted by this guy, Dan Cleveland. His name is Dan Cleveland. And they don't really get into what his deal is.
Sorry.
That's okay. They don't really get into like what his deal is, but he clearly has some kind of mental disorder. Like he's taking Zoloft and Prozac at 150% of the dose he's supposed to be taking, like he mentions this. And he's got some kind of OCD or some kind of schizophrenia or something. But the documentary is about, have you ever seen American Movie? About Mark Borchardt making his movie, Coven? So this is kind of like an American Movie, but about a band. It's chronicling this journey to make this album, like their first album as Dark Horse. And he's not really a great singer. Like the music's okay. And the 2 real mainstays of the band at this point are Dan Cleveland and his friend, his bassist, Sean Cassidy. And they're trying to make this album, and they go through all these different members, and people keep quitting, and they just can't like gel with this guy, this Dan Cleveland guy, because of all these mental disorders that he has going on, right? He thinks he's like the best singer in the world. When anybody tells him that he's not a good singer, he kind of like, he doesn't really blow up, but he kind of, you can tell it like it's a sore spot for him because he thinks he's so good. And he's like an inventor. So every time they try to do something a real simple way, he has to develop some kind of way to make it more difficult. So for example, they have a live date, like they're going to be playing at a club. And he lives in the basement of a house. All his equipment, like his guitars, his amps, everything are in the basement. Rather than just carry them out of the basement, he has to develop this like ramp system with a pulley and all this shit, like a steel cable, all this stuff. And it makes it more difficult. One of the guys in the band's like, it breaks, like it just breaks spectacularly. And he's like, dude, we could just move this ramp out of the way and we could carry this stuff up and we could get it out of here in like an hour. He's like, no, I took the day off of work to develop it this way, to make it this way, to make it so much easier. It's like, dude, Dan, it's not making it easier. Stuff like that. He develops these ways to like lift weights of all these pulleys. He thinks he knows all this stuff about physics. It's just a really all over the place, but very oddly entertaining documentary about this fucked up band. I know you have a question. I can tell.
Yeah. So I don't know why this reminds me of, I'm hoping this isn't the next documentary you say, because I think you already said the title of it. Have you seen the Anvil documentary? It's called Anvil, the story of Anvil.
I have seen Anvil.
I don't know why, but what you just described reminds me of that. And there's something about like mid 80s to like current generation metal bands, when they make a documentary about them, it always just seems like a calamity of errors. And these guys, and again, I haven't seen the one you're talking about, but it just feels like there's one guy in the band that's just like, thinks the band is way bigger than what the rest of the world thinks the band is. And that's kind of how they like spin it off.
Well, I think Anvil actually eventually made it, right?
I think kind of.
Go
ask the average person who
the hell Anvil is.
Yeah, like I'd be willing to bet for every one person you get that's like, oh yeah, I saw that documentary, there's probably 50 that are like, who the fuck is Anvil? So,
yeah. So this whole thing chronicles multiple weeks of them trying to record this album, and they, by the end of it, like his wife kind of has to leave. She gets a job in California, so she leaves, but she's like a party clown in her spare time, so she's putting on party clown makeup. It's just the weirdest thing. One thing I'll point out about this documentary is, I was mentioning the weightlifting piece of it. So Dan Cleveland makes all these, he doesn't have like regular weights, like a weight set or machines. So he builds his own pulley system to do these like weights, and he'll just pile bricks into like a plastic milk carton connected by a steel cable that's taped together with duct tape or electrical tape or something. And the entire time I'm waiting for something to break and it all just to fall on his head, like because he positions the weight like right next to his head, because why wouldn't you? So that's chronicling the first album. So this other documentary called Atlas Moth is after that. It started filming in 99. I think it got released in 2001. So this is after the first album's finished, and the second album is recorded, but he's moved out. He's in an apartment now. His buddy Sean has this barn that they built these huge stacks of these two huge cabinets for him to play bass, like for his PA setup, and they're mixing their second album.
I'm imagining something that's dramatically huger than what would be necessary for whatever he's doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
It's like these two cabinets that are 8 feet tall.
Yeah,
that are just massive, that they've developed on their own, that Dan Cleveland has developed on his own. They've recorded the second album.
Do they sound pretty bitchin' though?
Oh, it's not bad.
Yeah,
it's not bad. So the second documentary is all about them trying to mix this album and record it onto mini disc, and then from mini disc onto CD. It's like this whole convoluted way, and Dan Cleveland is like, this is the way that I've developed this. It's, I've developed this sound system that only this is why we sound so unique, just all this crazy shit. And this one focuses more on the individual band members. So it's Dan Cleveland, Sean Cassidy, the bassist, and this guy, John, I don't remember his last name, but he's the drummer. And they're all talking. It's just this like character study of these people. This Sean Cassidy guy's really into Moths. specifically the Atlas moth, which is supposed to be like the world's biggest moth or something. Dan Cleveland obviously is his own character, and this John guy, the drummer, is like about photography, and they're trying to design their album cover, and it's just more insanity. Like the documentaries, both of them in tandem are very listless. Like they don't really have much like my meandering about this. It's very like all over the place, but they're super. I just found them like infinitely entertaining, even though I didn't know what the hell was going on. They're just like, these characters are so entertaining. You're like, what the fuck is happening? What are these people talking about?
Entertaining.
Yeah, I would highly, if you can find them. I don't know if they're on YouTube. Like I mentioned last episode, I have a subscription to Found Footage Festival. I've been like gargling their balls the last 2 episodes. I have their Rewindo subscription, and those are both on there. So I've been kind of diving into the stuff that they have on their service.
I'm curious. I know you're not a big metal guy. I'm probably more of the metal guy than you are, even though I'm not either. Do they actually sound original or distinct, or do they just sound like every other metal band?
No, it's funny because the music itself sounds really interesting. Like it's not necessarily my cup of tea, but I can tell that there's like a lot of musicality and everything that goes into it. But when the guy sings, the singer Dan, he's just not very good, and he was doing all these cat screams and stuff. What they've told him, like, please, you got to stop doing that. Like that's ruining all this music, right? But they were trying to be nice about it, so they weren't really telling him fully that this was an issue. So, you know, you can kind of draw your own conclusion from that. But I think the second album that they're talking about in the second documentary, they're both by the same guy. No. Rolf Belgum is his name.
I was thinking of Rolf the Muppet.
Maybe that's what he's named after. But yeah, so they're just super interesting. I recommend wholeheartedly.
Sounds like something I would probably enjoy.
I think you'd dig it. Honestly. Yeah, I would think you'd dig it.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's it. That's been filling my days.
Well, then I'll go over some of my bullshit. So this is the last of my Christmas movies that I put in there, but I felt the need to bring it up because you threatened us with doing Silent Night, Deadly Night 3 at Batch. And I can tell you this, I just rewatched Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
I have no fucking desire to do Silent Night, Deadly Night 3 or 4 at Batch. 5, maybe, but 3 or 4, okay, so just we might or might not do, like, we can do them as episodes because that's a whole different, like, can of worms. I only have to watch it once for that. Can of worms is not a pun that was intended if you saw the 4th movie. But, you know, the 3rd movie's fine. It basically picks up with Ricky being, now he's Bill Moseley for some reason.
Okay.
And he's essentially catatonic until he's not, because Santa shows up. So, you know, red car, and he goes back to doing stuff. But it just, like, when you make the character, he basically has this, like, head ornament thing on. He kind of looks like Krang from the Ninja Turtles, except the brain's on top of his head instead of his stomach. It's a weird, I don't quite know what they were going for with it. I guess I don't know. But it's really just not that great a movie. It's one of those movies, like, this could have been like a 30-minute like short story and it might have been okay, but as a hour-and-a-half movie, it's like, Jesus Christ, hurry the fuck up. And then the 4th movie, now we get Clint Howard in there, and that's always a plus. Except you get a lot of shirtless, like, having sex Clint Howard. Why are you saying Clinton? I don't know. You get a lot of that. You get a lot of, like, worms and, like, weird birthing scenes. Like, this birthing scene kind of puts extra to shame in a way. Yeah, a lot of gross stuff like that. And I like that the movie is that, like, that fucking far out there, because it is one of those movies that is just way the fuck out there. I don't want to sit through 3 again to be able to do 4, so I'm not too worried about that. 5 is almost where they were. 1 is funny because Mickey Rooney is in it, and he, like, famously, like, pissed and moaned about the first 2 movies because they're, you know, unwholesome and Santa and all that shit.
He's in the series?
Yeah, he's in part 5.
Oh god.
So he's like one of the main bad guys, although you don't really find that out till like the last third of the movie. So spoilers for this movie that hopefully you don't watch. But it takes a little bit of like a very, very small like cue from Halloween 3 in that they're trying to use toys to kill kids, or kill kid, I guess, more accurately. But there's some stuff in that movie that's just so fucking ridiculous that it's kind of entertaining in that way that we tend to laugh at. But at the end of the day, it's still not a good movie and definitely not worth us trying to force other people to watch when there's plenty of other good Christmas horror movies out there in December.
Is it like Child's Play or something that they're trying to
No.
No?
Think more like Small Soldiers.
Oh, okay.
But like a horror movie. I guess more like Demon Toys, but I don't know. It's not quite that animated. Like the toys are animated and they do move and do shit, but not to the extent of one of those movies.
Okay.
So, and at the end of the day, I mean, unless you want to see like Mickey Rooney try to down a whole bottle of Jack Daniels in one scene, like that's kind of funny. Like, why'd you pour it in a glass if you're just going to drink the whole fucking thing? Don't Bluto that shit, right? But anyway, that's the last of my Christmas movies for the year because contrary to what I said earlier, even though you're hearing this in January, we're recording it in December.
What?
So I know.
I'm in January.
You know, when it comes to vanity projects, I much prefer the Champagne and Bullets to the documentary on Netflix called Aaron Rodgers Enigma.
I saw that today. I was scrolling through and I saw he had a doc.
It's 100% like the Stallone one. I'm not even going to say like the Schwarzenegger one because I like the Schwarzenegger one, but it's 100% like how far can I get my own dick down my own throat while I talk about this and try to make people like me and stuff. But they spend less time talking about him playing for the Jets than they do anything else, which is fair because he has, I think most of this documentary was filmed before the season started. So he'd only played 4 live snaps for the Jets at that point before he blew out his knee or whatever the fuck he did.
Yeah, it's Achilles. So is this like while he's on the mend?
This is about his whole life and why he chooses to do things the way he does. Now, on the one hand, if you told me this guy kind of does his own thing and likes to take hallucinogens to kind of cut loose and all that, you would think I'd be on board with that. That's usually like, yeah, I don't have a problem with any of that stuff. But there's something about the way Aaron Rodgers talks about it and does it that's just so fucking cunty that it really makes you just want to punch him in the face more so. And you can't deny the guy's like been, maybe not now, but he's been like he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Like there's no real denying that, but he's a real like, I don't get the impression that he's the piece of shit that a lot of people think he is in the media. Like, I don't know that I care about his weirdness with his family or like, you know, his weirdness with the media. That part I really don't care about. But he definitely seems really like new age hippie cunty at the same time, but like not in a way that's
endearing,
cool, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I prefer he goes back and reshoots the whole thing as a 3-hour like reenactment of Champagne and Bullets. And that would probably be a better vanity piece for sure.
As long as he does a shimmy slide.
That would be ideal. The only other thing I'll touch on that I did that's worth going over now, I finally finished What We Do in the Shadows. So they just finished their 6th season. I don't know when the last episode aired, but it's all on Hulu right now. So you go through and watch the whole thing. And I've been kind of like dicking around with trying to get through the series. Like I've been watching like 3 or 4 episodes and then getting distracted and having to go back to it. And now that I've gone through it and like I don't have to pay as close attention to what's going on in the story, like not that it's a comedy, it's not like you need to pay that close of attention, but you know, I know it happened now, so it definitely feels like the type of show that's like, okay, well, you can be promoted or demoted to background noise, like that kind of thing. Like I just need something on while I'm doing whatever. Sure. Like I think it will get a lot of rewatch for that. But I will say I really respect any show that manages to pull the plug on itself while it's still really good, because it really didn't. I don't know if you're still watching or if you did watch it, but they never really had like a major decline in quality. Like obviously there's some episodes that are better than others. Yeah. Like you do 6 years of TV, that's going to happen. But there wasn't like a huge, like, if you didn't tell me this was the last season, I wouldn't feel like, God, this should be the last fucking season. Like, let's fucking go. You know, It didn't feel like that at all. So I respect the hell out of a show that is willing to say, let's stop while we're still good, as opposed to let's, you know, kill the golden goose, I guess. So it does good with that.
Yeah, I only watched the first couple seasons and I liked it, but didn't carry on much after that.
Truthfully, like if you like the first couple seasons, like I said, it does depart from that in some sense. Like there's obviously the characters have to evolve, otherwise you don't really have a show. And they do, at least in the last couple seasons, there's like a main storyline that like is the overarch for the season. And then there's little like subplots that go on. as you work through the season. And the subplots get crazier by the year. So maybe they were running out of ideas. So that's why they were going so nuts with stuff. But it never got to the point where I didn't at least find a good amount of laughter in each episode. So I can't really be mad about it. So yeah, that's basically all I got for this week. Go skip Aaron Rodgers, skip Silent Night, Deadly Night 3 through 4, and then go watch What We Do in the Shadows.
I wholeheartedly agree. It's an endorsement for me.
Yeah. So there we go. I watched some TV as opposed to just movies this week. Don't do that enough. But we also watched another movie this week because that's what we do around here, apparently. So we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk about a Giallo movie, which I think is new ground for us. We'll figure that out. So we'll be back in just a minute. Hi, everyone. AI John here. If you're a horror fan like me, check out the Fans of the Dead podcast. Mike and Jeremy dedicate every episode to a horror film, from the popular to the unknown. You can get their takes on some of the movies we've talked about, including Terrifier, The Burning, and Ghostbusters. Head over to yourunpodcast.com to check them out and all the other members of the You Run Podcast Network. And we're back. Real quick, just in case you didn't know, this is a video podcast now. So if for some reason you want to see our ugly mugs, you can do that. You can watch us either on Spotify through the video option, which I guess all you have to do is just leave your phone on, or you can watch us through YouTube if you prefer. Both of those are available with every episode going forward and the majority of our December episodes. Not all, but the majority of them. If you want, you could turn on your TV and watch us talk about the movie Murder Rock, which is not the only title this has. It's Murder Rock or Murder Rock Dancing Death or Slashdance or Murder Rock.
This isn't Slashdance.
I thought Slashdance was one of the titles this was.
This is not Slashdance.
Originally. I know it's not Slashdance, but I think that was its original title.
All right. Take your word for it.
Okay.
We will be talking about Slashdance, but not today.
Well, thank Christ. As for Murder Rock, we start with the third-party review, and I mentioned this to Sean. This is now, I think, the third week in a row where I can't go to Rotten Tomatoes to get a review, so I have to read a little bit more, which I'm not thrilled about. But over on Letterboxd, Califuego says, this movie had the least... Oh, spoilers, by the way.
Oh, no.
I don't know. This is kind of on the cover, depending on which poster you look at. But anyway, this movie had the least menacing slasher weapon ever, an ornate pin. It also had the lamest kills ever. Every kill was the same. Chloroform to the face, then pin to the titty. The best parts were hilariously bad songs mixed with even worse dancing. 1.5 out of 5 stars.
This
Sean,
person clearly doesn't appreciate art.
Sean, what is this chloroform titty all about?
Well, for that, we go to IMDb. I did want to mention that this is the second in our January New Year's resolutions podcast. I don't think we ever had a real great name, but does that even make sense? New Year's resolution podcast? Movies. Last year we...
Extra murder size.
Yeah, something like that. Last year, I think we focused more on aerobics. This year, it all kind of revolves around aerobics and dancing. So
let's just call it January Let's Get Sweaty.
All right, sounds good. January Let's Get Sweaty. Murder Rock. Back to that. We go to IMDb, we type in Murder Rock, we pull up Murder Rock Dancing Death. This gets a 5.5 out of 10 with 2.3 thousand ratings. I guess it's 2,300. This is not ranked in any way, shape, or form. And we go to the storyline and the plot. We go to the one on the top. It says the owner of a prestigious New York ballet school teams up with a male model to solve a series of bizarre murders of a few of the students. Okay. So if we scroll on down to the storyline.
Just a few of them.
Yeah. That's just a poorly constructed sentence anyways, but we go down the storyline. It says, a series of murders rock a dance academy in New York in which the mysterious directress, Candace, sets out to find the killer with a little assistance from a shady male model named George, who has a hidden agenda for her, as does she for him.
It's a little bit better than the first one.
Yeah, it's a little bit better constructed sentence.
Is there anyone in this movie that we care about?
There's a few people, but I don't know how many people any of our viewers recognize. I recognized a couple. So just to
a lot
mention,
of Giallo regulars in here from what I read.
yeah,
and
this is the
looked at.
first Fulci movie that we've talked about. So I'm actually kind of surprised it took this long for us to talk about it. And it's not like a Giallo themed month, but in the cast are a lot of, like you said, a lot of regulars in that genre, a lot of Fulci, Argento regulars. But we have Greta, also known as Greta Giancarlo, is the one I recognized. She's from Demons, Terminator 2, not that Terminator 2, but the Italian Terminator 2. We've got Olga Karlatos, who plays Candace, the main instructor. She was in Purple Rain, again in a Fulci movie called Zombie. Purple Rain was not a Fulci movie. And we've got Claudio Cassinelli, who plays Dick Gibson. He's the school owner. This seems like a running thing. We've got another actor who has ties to Hands of Steel, and we talked about that last week with Daniel Green. Claudio Cassinelli is the one that actually died in the real helicopter crash in that movie, which is fucked up that I'm laughing about it, but that's kind of that's how I know him. And
It's
then,
what
of course,
we do around here, apparently.
yeah. And then, of course, like I said, a lot of Fulci and Argento regulars, including a cameo by Al Cliver. He plays the cop that does the voice analysis about mid to 2/3 of the way through the movie.
I think this is the first Giallo movie we did. I want to say it's the first Italian, although it takes place in New York, and at least the copy I watched was in English and dubbed fairly well if it was dubbed. But do you have a lot of history with Giallo, or is that something that you've really dived into or gone down that rabbit hole?
No, it's really a blind spot for me. Like, I know the directors and I know some of the movies, like obviously Fulci and all the zombie stuff that he's done. I think even off mic, we talked a little bit about like Zombie 2, Zombie 3, all those different movies. I know Fulci didn't do all of them, but this is really the first one I can think of that I've really watched, like dug in deep. I've never even seen Suspiria. Like I haven't seen a lot of the Argento stuff. Well, none of the Argento stuff other than Phenomenon, which is also known as the one with Jennifer Connelly. It's like Critters or something.
Newer
Is what
one, I think.
Yeah, something. I can't remember what that one's American name is. How about you?
It's like you said, it's admittedly a very like large blind spot for me. I don't even know that these count as Giallo movies. I've never thought of them that way, but I like both the Demons movies, which although he didn't direct them, Argento's name's all over them. I think I have seen Suspiria, but it's been a long fucking time. It's actually part of this admitted blind spot is what led to our question of the week. So more on that later. But I know there's a lot of like, I know the theming of it. Like, I know there's a lot of red tones. There's almost a lot of that. Like, it feels to me like a lot of like, I think very classic 1930s monster movie, but with like, I don't want to go as far to say slasher vibes, but like more blood, more gore, and typically dramatically more nudity all along with it. So those are all fun, but it's really not something that I really dive into much. And I don't really have a good answer as to why, because more often than not, like it seems like something that I would get into. I just haven't done it.
Yeah, and watching, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but this one doesn't really feel like, I mean, it's Fulci, but it doesn't feel like it's really Giallo, because it's more of like a murder mystery suspense kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's Giallo. Well, so again, not being an expert on Giallo, and we might as well just get into it from here. So this is your spoiler warning.
Yes.
There's probably a lot of people that haven't seen this movie, because I know it's not the most popular one out there based off how hard it is to find a review on it. So if you haven't seen this, I assume we'll have a link as to where you can watch it. So you can do that. I don't think we're going to get into anything that's going to ruin the story for you, but how much of a purist you want to be. That's why we'll say it now. Backtrack. I don't feel like this is really like a straight Giallo movie, because there's no gore in this. There's very little blood in this. Like there's a lot of that, like the way the camera moves, the way the lighting is, which had a tendency to get on my nerves at certain points. A lot of the like close-ups and extreme zoom-ins on people when they scream and all that stuff, that felt very Italian and what I always think of with a whole Giallo thing. But it doesn't have quite frankly, it doesn't have the violence that I would think it would need to be more truly in that genre.
Yeah, I agree. This feels very much, like I said, it feels like a murder mystery, thriller, suspenseful horror movie. Like you said, there's not a lot of gore. The body count isn't very high. It definitely has a very stylized look. Lots of mirrors, lots of shadows, hard shadows on stuff. One thing in particular that I was really puzzled about is, so a lot of this takes place in this like dance school, like a studio. And basically the premise is that these students are practicing or they're rehearsing for this show. And the producers come in and they're like, hey, listen, we're moving the show date up 2 weeks and we're only going to take 3 of the students. So it becomes this competition as to like which 3 students are going to be picked. And that's when the murders start. So the competition, like the really high end dancers end up getting taken out first. And I couldn't quite understand. Number one, this is like a performing arts school, not necessarily a high school, but like a college or something. And
I got the impression it was like Broadway light, not like actual Broadway, but like
training.
Yeah. Or like, so I'm going to use local comparisons. Like you start at a venue like St. Andrew's Hall, which is not where you start, but like it's a smaller venue, but it still has some notoriety. And if you can fill that place and all of a sudden you're playing at the State Theater or something like that. I felt like this is the St. Andrew's Hall of whatever this dance school is. And it's professional in the sense that like I get the impression that these girls are supposed to be paid dancers or whatever for what they're doing, but I don't get the impression that they're going to be like up for any Tony Awards or anything like that.
Well, the thing I don't understand is they have like this set timer, like, hey, you got 15 minutes to get out of here. The whole place locks down. And there's just this, like, they just flicker the lights on and off on a computer, like on a timer. Yeah. Like every time they're in the school, if it's after hours or when it's the suspenseful thing happens inside of it, the lights are flashing and you're like, what the fuck's going on? How am I supposed to see anything? I'm in the shower. You're giving me 5 minutes to shower. I don't get the impression that they're paid to be here because some of the girls, like one of the girls she's not quite a stripper, but she's like dancing in a club. It's very Flashdance inspired. Like they're raining water on her and she's doing this gyrating moves and stuff. I loved in that scene, the like leotard or the dance outfit she's wearing has like a keyhole on the back and half of her ass crack is like shown in this thing. It's like, oh, that's pretty classy. That's classy. What kind of club is this here? Flash dancing around in? Where can I see the ass crack?
I just think it's funny that every time, like, I thought maybe this is just my taste in women in this movie, but every time I noticed a woman, I'm like, oh, she looks really like exceptionally gorgeous. She was the next person that died every single fucking time. Like the first girl off the bat, like the one that's, the first girl that you see, I think she dies in the shower.
Yeah.
The first one. They show them all doing their little, like, it's not a line dance, but their little pre-choreographed thing with the same song that plays over and over again through the whole fucking movie.
Sure.
Yeah. And there's one girl, and she's like, I think like third from the left. And I'm like, oh, that girl's like dramatically more good looking than, a lot of these. And then the next fucking scene, it's like, here's a pin in the tit. Oh, I guess you're dead. What the fuck? And then same thing with like Flashdance girl that you're talking. I'm like, all right, well, she's not the girl
like
from the
second
first
most
scene.
Attractive girl in this class. Oh, yeah. She's dead.
I'm like, oh, yeah, exactly. I'm like, what the fuck? So I guess the real lesson of this movie is don't have expectations. So.
Yeah, there you go. And the thing, like the teacher, Candace, that's what it is. Candace. Candace is like the instructor.
Candace, Claudio, who the fuck?
Yeah, whatever. The directress, as the plot of the storyline or whatever mentions, she's like this whole weird piece where she sees this guy. She gets in the car and after the first girl gets murdered and she sees a billboard with this guy's picture and she had a dream and the guy from the billboard was in the dream and he tries to kill her. So then she hunts this guy down. He's in New York. He just happens to be in New York and starts this whole romantic relationship with the guy. And it's a whole weird turn of events. Like very much of the movie, or a lot of the movie, not very much, a lot of the movie, I'm like, okay, where does this guy fit in? Like, how does he fit into this whole thing? Because the movie's very much about this dance class and all these students like competing for these dancing roles or these roles in this show. And then this side guy just shows up out of nowhere. And then that becomes like a B story to the rest of it. It's just, it feels very choppy and not very coherent.
Okay, I'll agree with you that it feels choppy and incoherent, but I feel like you're talking about, what's his name, George, the like main dude with the comb over or whatever. The guy who's,
George
like,
Webb.
Basically, there. Yeah, I felt like he was the reddest of red herrings I've seen in a movie in a long time, and I kind of feel like, with the exception of the cop, who I really like the cop in this movie, because he's just like, every time that he's on screen, it's like his face is the entire frame and he's just shoving food in his face. He makes Brad Pitt look skinny, like the way that he's eating in this fucking movie. But with the exception of the cop, I feel like every character in this movie that basically doesn't end up with a needle in their tit is just like red herring, like you're swimming through a sea of red herrings to get to the reveal in this movie. And by the time you get to the reveal, there's so many of them that it's like pretty so for me, I found it pretty unspectacular, because it was like, well, it's the only one that you didn't throw a red herring at. So,
yeah, there are so many just trying to throw you off the scent.
Yeah.
I mean, everything there, the plot, like actually following. If sometimes you watch murder mysteries, or you watch like, I don't know, I'll use like Knives Out for an example, right? Have you seen Knives Out, by the way?
No.
If you watch Knives Out,
go ahead and ruin it though.
Well, I'm not going to ruin it. But if you watch Knives Out and you watch it all the way to the end, obviously you see the whole thing. You can watch it again and you can start to piece together the story and be like, oh yeah, no, I see how that happened. They might not necessarily show it to you as it's happening, but later in the movie, I said that
about Scream when we talked about that.
Yeah, and it shows you, like, you can logically plot out how this all happened. This movie, there's no way you could. It's just it feels like they had this idea and they just didn't want you to be able to figure it out at all. So at the very end, I'm not going to give the ending away just because, and didn't want to skip all the way to the end, like minutes into us talking about this, but you're all the way at the end, and it's just like the last person you'd suspect, and it's like, yeah, they just wrap it up in like 10 seconds. Yeah, they did it because of this. And all the police are just like, yeah, no, I guess you're right. That's cool. All right, see ya. It's just so unceremonious.
So now that we got to the unceremonious ending of this, were there things that you liked in this movie?
I did. I mean, like I said, I liked I don't know, it sounded like you thought it was a con, but I liked the stylistic choice. Like, I really liked the hard shadows. I liked the mirrors, like using the colors, and just how really light, like in general, how they use light in the entire movie. I thought that there's a scene where Candace and George go out to eat, and they go to like a Chinese restaurant or something. And the guy comes around, he's like, oh, fortune, I'll tell you your fortune. And George is like, I don't want, no, I'm good. I'm cool. And Candace is very much like, no, do it. And the guy, after he tells the fortune, there's this flashback scene where it's the Asian guy giving the fortune. He goes, a murderer, a murderer, a murderer. It's just this whole stupid, hilarious scene that happens where the guy telling the fortune, he almost cracks the case like wide open with half the movie to go. And you're the whole time I'm just like, don't tell me
there's any almost about it.
So. Well, it's flipped, right? So you think it's one person, but it's the other person. And I was just like, don't tell me that they actually told you who the actual murderer was this early in the movie. And I had this note written saying like, so-and-so's the murderer. And as I get to the end, I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then I'm like, oh, I think maybe they are the murderer. No, just kept flip-flopping back and forth. And the very end, like we said, just totally flips it on its ear. Just 180s the whole thing. And you're like, oh, okay. I didn't necessarily like the ending, but I did think that whole restaurant scene was hilarious. I love the cop, like you mentioned. There's little bits of humor to the movie that I don't know if it's like intentional humor, but I thought it was funny. Those are some of the lights that I had about the movie.
So I'll piggyback on that because I'm not far off on most of that. As far as the unintentional humor, one of the funniest things I thought was right near the beginning after the first murder. The cops are there and they basically wheel this corpse out in front of the entire dance studio. They don't clear the room. They don't get anyone out of the way. They don't tell people not to touch evidence. They just wheel this corpse out and start talking to everyone like very like, oh, what are you doing tomorrow night? Oh, whatever, and with this like body laying there, like partially covered by a sheet. So I kind of thought that was funny. Like is this how they do it in Italy? They just leave the corpse there while they talk about going to get coffee or some shit. So I thought that was funny.
You just all you're missing is someone eating over the corpse.
Well, I didn't notice that. I didn't see that. So
I didn't either.
Maybe that's just an American thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if they had pulled out a big like bowl of
Hoagie.
gabagool and started, or that, whatever.
Gabagool.
Yeah, whatever. Spaghetti. I did like the lighting and the camera work, especially the angle, like all that. So everything you said about that aspect of it, I did like. What I didn't like in that is the constant turning the lights on and off thing. It was okay at first. By the end of the movie, I just had enough of it. Like, and it doesn't feel like an effect per se. It literally feels like there's someone on set with one big switch that's like kill all the lights, and he's literally just in there flicking it on and off through whenever they tell him to do it. So using it once, okay, sure. Maybe if they had only used it during the murders, I would have said, okay, sure. But by the end of the movie, I'm like, Jesus Christ, just leave the fucking lights on. Like, this looks fine without it. But aside from me getting annoyed with it, the camera work is awesome in this. It, again, without being a Giallo expert by any stretch, it gives you that feel of a Giallo movie, even though I don't know that this fully lives up to the billing of Giallo.
And I do feel like that whole flicking on and off of the lights is probably supposed to be disorienting, but it just doesn't. It's just overboard. It's like you said, if it was used once or maybe even just when the murders happen, it might be one thing. But because when they're practically every time they're in the school, that part of the scene is going to end with that.
And they just refuse to. Yeah, it's like they have a short and just refuse to fix the fucking fuse box or something.
So you just hire somebody in here and fix this shit,
right? How about negatives? Anything you didn't like on this one?
Well, I think, like I said, the movie's just a little too twisty-turny. Like, it's impossible to follow. If you wanted to watch it, like I mentioned, if you wanted to watch it after the fact to say, like, oh, this is how they did this is how they timed that, it's impossible because they're following one person. He's clearly the one that did it. And then they talk to him and they're like, maybe you're not the one that did it. And they go talk to somebody else. He's clearly the one that did it. Maybe you're not. There's no way to figure it out. And I always feel that's kind of a cheap move when you're making like a mystery or a thriller or something that you want the audience maybe to be able to figure out ahead of time. It's just impossible to do. And like we touched on, my note literally says, whose bright idea was it to have the lights in the school slow strobe when it's about to close for the night? Like, that's almost a sin in this movie, the overuse of that.
So this might be kind of the same complaint, but I'm going to word it differently, I think. I don't know if it falls under pacing problems or just general poor storytelling or a combination of both. But this movie, although it's only an hour and a half long, which is right about where I usually like a movie, it really felt like it dragged for me. Even though there's enough stuff that this, I'm going to sound really chauvinistic for a minute, but it's got really attractive women. It's got like a murder plot. It's got interesting enough characters, even though most of them don't have much to do in the movie. It really felt like by probably about an hour into this movie, I was really feeling like, all right, I don't really feel like I need a whole ton more of this. Like, there wasn't enough going on that was interesting other than this little, like, it's not even this, but it felt like police procedural type bullshit in a lot of ways. Like, it hit a point where I would have liked it to either move some shit along or throw something else in there to kind of keep things interesting, or just cut it down by 15 minutes or something to kind of wrap it up a little quicker. So I thought it had some pacing problems. Honestly, like, the fact that this was likely dubbed probably helped me a lot, because if this had the pacing problems, the disorienting lights, and I had to read the screen the whole time, that might have been a problem.
Yeah, this would have been pretty torturous if it was subtitled rather than dubbed, right. I think.
That's kind of my biggest negatives. I mean, would I have liked to see more carnage throughout this movie? A little bit, but honestly, if this turned into like a Friday the 13th movie, like from a kill standpoint, that almost would have thrown it off. Like, it would have been a whole different vibe. So I kind of like the subtleness of the kills to an extent, but like, I think you could have put a little bit more in there without pulling you out of the same like mood, if that makes any sense at all to it.
Yeah, I agree. And I do agree with you. The pacing was really bad. I feel like towards the end of the movie, it starts to pick up a little bit, but there's a lot in the middle where it's just like, you're just waiting for something to happen. Like you're waiting, you watch a movie like this because you're waiting for some kind of clue or some kind of Easter egg or something in the background to happen where you're like, oh, I can personally point the finger at this person, this character in this movie, and that's the person who I think did it. But like you said, because the pacing's all over the place and because all the red herrings, it's impossible to do that.
Major points that we haven't touched on that you need to get off your chest?
No, I mean, it's more of the leotarded men and women, because there are men that dance around this movie too. It's just, you can tell that Fulci must have been inspired by Flashdance. Like this is,
yeah,
it's that one scene is almost like,
well, that's why I brought up the title Flashdance, is because that was his title. He actually, from what I again listened to and looked at getting ready for this, he saw Flashdance and wanted to make Flashdance with murders. I guess he succeeded.
Flashdance, but with murders. Sounds great.
I mean, you hear Fulci attached to it and almost feel like, yeah, but like you could have done that with a lot more murder. This is what we got. So, yeah, I don't really have a lot really to add to it. I mean, I feel like the last movie, I said this too, like there's not a whole shit ton to it. Like it is a murder mystery movie, which should feel like it's more intriguing and kind of draws you in more. But between the pacing problems and the constant turning the lights on and off, it's just kind of, it's there. Like, it's not bad. Like, it's definitely not the movie I would say, like, this is how you want to pop your Giallo cherry. I don't think this would be the one that I would recommend, not really knowing a ton of them. But you're right. The humor does save it. There's things in this movie that are definitely redeeming. This is a far cry from the worst movie that we've watched, like, for sure. It's kind of hard to really have a lot to latch on to, like, super positive or super negative with this one, because the things that it does well are honestly kind of balanced out pretty well by the things that it does that kind of annoy you. So it's like, oh,
yeah, I would clearly say this is more of a movie than last week's, than Pulse Beat was. This feels like there was an actual idea here and there was an actual movie all put together. I was laughing because whenever you say like turn the lights on and off, it reminds me of like a kindergarten class when they want the kids to calm down or shut the hell up. They flicker the lights on. You could almost say that happens in this, but they're usually just going at it or something.
I kept thinking of this old Simpsons episode where Bart and Lisa are fighting in the living room and Homer starts turning the lights on and off and going, defense, as he's flicking the lights on and off. I was like, I don't know why. That's where my mind went with it. Maybe this movie needed a Homer in it. That would have made it interesting.
You could say that about a lot of movies, I think.
I think you could. You got anything else you want to add, or are we ready to fire up grills?
Then you're in for a big treat, no? Because it's hot dog time.
Kick us off. Where are we going?
I'll start. I was just going to say, I don't need breadcrumbs in a movie, but this movie, like, red herrings and MacGuffins you into submission. If you're crunching your popcorn in the last 30 seconds really loud, you're going to miss who the actual killer is. You're going to be like, what happened in this movie? And it makes it feel just really cheap to me when you don't get the satisfaction of being able to put it all together at the end. I don't really think this feels like a Giallo movie. It definitely doesn't feel like a Fulci movie, because I'm used to Fulci being like I said, all the shit like Zombie and all that stuff. And like we said, it feels like he saw Flashdance and thought, I should make a movie like that. It's really all style, not a lot of substance. I love the setting. I love seeing gritty New York City, even if it was through like a Italian lens. And I think this is worth watching once, but I really don't see myself watching it again, really, after this. I got to give Murder Rock half a hot dog.
Whose hot dog is this, huh? Is it yours?
I mean, I'm kind of right there with you. This movie is fun in the sense that it's a murder movie. It's got gorgeous women in it. I think I've said that like 5 times now, but apparently that's pretty par for the course with Giallo movies, is, gorgeous women that are half naked or fully naked. I think if you're going into this movie as, like, for me, I'm a slasher fan and I like gory movies and that type of stuff. If you're going into this movie from that aspect, it's going to leave you kind of wanting, because it doesn't deliver on any of those. If you're going into this movie looking for like a gritty, like detective-y type crime drama, think like Seven or Long Legs or that type of thing. It doesn't really deliver on that because honestly, there's just not the dramatic like effect there with it by any stretch. I don't think that's what it's supposed to be because I think it's supposed to be closer to that Giallo vibes, which is honestly somewhere right between those two. But I'm not 100% sure that it really delivers on that either. That said, I mean, I'm not mad that I watched this. I don't know that I would go back to it and watch it again, but I feel like it's the kind of movie that it's like, yeah, that's a movie. I don't feel like anyone's going to leave this movie like pissed off that they watched it, but I also don't feel like anyone's going to be like, this is the best fucking thing I've ever seen. Like, it's very much so right in the middle. So I'm kind of right there with you. Like, watch it. Don't love it. Don't hate it. Like, half a hot dog at best type thing. Would I rewatch this? I don't think, unless I like found myself on like a straight Giallo, like I got a marathon through all Fulci shit or something like that. Unless I'm doing something like that, I can't really see myself thinking, you know what I need to watch again? Murder Rock. Probably not going to happen. But you never know. I've watched Street Trash more than once, so maybe.
New Year's resolution, watch more Fulci movies for the show this year. Or Giallo in general, I guess.
Giallo in general. So, and that kind of leads us over to what the question of the week was. I did not consult with Sean this week on the question of the week, but I think he'll be okay with it.
I'm all right.
This week's question is, what are your recommendations for someone just getting into Giallo films? So basically, we're just asking you to recommend us some Giallo that's hopefully better than this. There are a handful of titles that are recurring themes here, so I apologize or say get used to it in advance, but here we go. We're going to start over on Blue Sky because there's not as many responses there. At Cinema Recall on Blue Sky Social says, Blood and Black Lace, although Tenebrae is a damn good movie too. So Blood and Black Lace is one that you'll hear a couple times throughout this. Our friends over at Podcast in the Woods, who is at Woods Podcast 1 on pretty much every social media, says, Deep Red is a brilliant film and one of the most straightforward in the genre. It's very approachable for someone just dipping their toes in. Also, for a fun bonkers, I said bonkers because, you know, Seinfeld, Giallo-esque film Pieces, exactly what you think it is. I've seen Pieces. I've never thought of it as a Giallo-like film, but it definitely has a lot of red in it, so we'll go with that. You've seen Pieces, haven't you?
I haven't. I don't think so.
New Year's resolution for 2025, we're going to make Sean watch Pieces. We're going to start on Threads then. So we only had one person respond, and he is apocryphilic. Ballas says Blood and Black Lace, and he also says The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Both great ones to cut your teeth on, or as one would. That's what they say. So lots of red. Over on Instagram, so people who responded on there, we're going to start with Brie X Cabrera. She says, Blood and Black Lace! Exclamation point.
Was it on all caps?
Nope, just an exclamation point.
Oh, okay.
So,
got it.
At Midnight Movie Theater says, The Strange Vice of Mrs. Wadrath, Wadrth, Wadrth?
Sure. Wadrath.
Sure. Wadrath. At No, Yeah, Totally, Dude says, Opera and stage fright turned me into Giallo Gallo. So opera and stage fright. And then Scott over at You Run Podcast, who is obviously a member of the You Run Podcast Network, says Deep Red. Like I said, there's a theme going here. There's a couple of these that get repeated. On Did You Get That in Film says Suspiria obviously is a classic, but Deep Red is also a really great one.
They're talking about the new Suspiria, right?
Sure. I haven't seen that
I highly
one.
doubt
I've
it.
heard
I
that.
highly
I've
doubt
heard mixed. I highly doubt it too, but I've heard mixed things on that one. Good friend and frequent collaborator on the show, Jordana, over at Pretty Killer Podcast, says The New York Ripper by Fulci, Bay of Blood, Deep Red, and Suspiria. So it sounds like we got to watch Deep Red, and what was the other one that kept coming up? Oh,
Blood and Black Lace.
Second here. Yeah, here it is. At Final Girl Shannon says, Blood and Black Lace is essential and very influential. Deep Red is a personal favorite, though you can't go wrong with any Argento film. And anything with Edwidge French, Case of the Bloody Iris, All the Colors of the Dark. I'd also go with Torso and What Have You Done to Solange too.
Solange.
Solange 2, as in TOO, also
As well.
number 2. Yes.
Oh, there's a number 2 in there too. What
No.
have you done to Solange 2? 2?
This is why I'm an American. I can't even deal with talking about other countries without fucking it up.
Favorite part of the show, John?
Me
The
talking
end.
shit about myself or not reading. Or reading out loud. At the Gory Gary says, the bird with the crystal plumage because it has the easiest plot to follow. Fair enough. So, at Doom City Cinema, they're another venue that is in Detroit. If you like watching old horror movies, you should check them out. They do them on occasion. Follow them on Instagram. They're awesome. They say Tenebrae is my absolute favorite. The House with Laughing Windows, maybe the only true Giallo horror. I'm not in the position to debate that. Deep Red, Blood and Black Lace, and Suspiria. And then last and certainly not least is XX Pearly XX. She says, where do I even start? Cracks Knuckles. New York Ripper, duh. I know that Jordana is going to suggest it too. Torso, strip nude for your killer. Don't torture a duckling. The Strange Case of Mrs. Worth again. And Blood and Black Lace. So it sounds like we need to at least take a look at Blood and Black Lace and Deep Red. Is there an Italian month? What month is Italian?
I don't know. There's no months that start with I. That would be the alliterative way to do it, I guess.
There's not really a G month either. So whoever wants to let us know, what is the most Italian month? Please let us know in the comments of this episode, because we might go ahead and commandeer that month and turn it into Giallo, whatever.
As long as it's not March, because Mars is the Roman god of war, right? March would be that month, but we already have stuff for March.
I was going to say March, October, and December. Well, December kind of are spoken for. So
and
hopefully it's one of
January.
those other months.
Oh, wait. And February. Can't do May.
So you got
wrestlers.
half the year to. Yeah, half the year that maybe we'll talk about Giallo shit. So
maybe.
So I'm assuming you don't have any that you want to add as far as Giallo recommendations, because I don't.
No, man. We're in the same boat. We're in the same boat with a pail to bail it out.
See, you heard it here first. You heard it here first. Do you want to talk about the nostril picker and Pack Icos essentially? We're your guys. You want to talk about Giallo?
Maybe
we're going to make an ass of ourselves. So, with that said, I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else that we need to tack on here?
We are not classy bitches.
We are not classy bitches, but we can be found at all kinds of places on the internet. We are available for all of our actual shows and stuff and things. You can find all of our old episodes and all of our new episodes at our site, which is crap.town. You can also leave us feedback there. There's an option to send messages to us in which we can reply to you, or you can tell us what to watch. Tell us what month is the most Italian month, so we can do maybe doing a Giallo month. Maybe. You can also reach out to us and find all of our previous episodes and all of our upcoming episodes at yourunpodcast.com. Also, make sure to check out the other great members while you are visiting the site. As for social media, we are at Dewey Podmonster and all the social media networks that I give a shit about. You want to hit us up there, please do. This is where we post questions of the week. That's your best chance to get read on the show. Or maybe if I like what you're doing, I'll promote your stuff too, kind of like Doom City Cinema. Sean, what am I forgetting?
Well, you stole my question of the week thing, but if you want your question of the week answer read on the show, you got to respond on social media, because that's where we post them, that's where you read them, and that's where John flubs through them. If you want to check out anything we talked about in this episode, at least the stuff that we were watching, it's probably going to be in the show notes. Check out the show notes. Most of those are links to, sometimes free, sometimes they are affiliate links, but they'll take you to places. If you click those affiliate links, if you buy a movie that we talked about or a TV show or whatever, we might get a couple bucks. It's the best way to support the show. As John also mentioned, this is a video podcast. You can watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/@DeweyPodmonster or on Spotify. You can check us out on all the social media networks. I probably already said that. You can find out my craft beer adventures, misadventures, a lot of bit of a hiatus, but you can check it out at youtube.drafttherapy.com, or you can find me on social media at Draft Therapy.
Go on to Draft Therapy and find out who's been the most frequent guest on there. The answer might surprise you.
Would it?
Absolutely. So, anyway, that's
It's
all we got
Lucio
for this
Fulci.
week. So,
Spoiler.
I mean, I'm pretty sure he's dead, but I'm sure he's a big beer guy, right?
Yeah, he probably was.
His corpse is just floating around in the back of your pickup truck, going to brewery to review things.
Yeah.
Love it. So, all right. So we will be back next week. We'll be talking more sweaty January or whatever we fucking name this. Have a good week and cheers.
Blah, blah, blah.